about LeBron James, you guys' favorite topic, and his podcast with JJ Redick. Now, usually, a lot of basketball players have started making their own podcasts. A lot of athletes, a lot of influential people, they make their podcasts, and it's becoming a lot more popular now. It started with Paul George, and now it's just building and building and building to so many other people, and so many people have their own podcasts. So that way it allows them to have their own platform where they get to say their own opinions and they get to speak their mind. And it's starting to gain a lot of traction going into the media, because a lot of the things that these players say are either really funny, really egregious, really good takes, or things of that nature. Like there's always something that everyone always has something to say, and it could either be very famous, like very good things to say, or very infamous, like for example Gilbert Arenas and some of his egregious takes. One of his takes on his own podcast was like, no one is afraid of LeBron. That is just not true. That is completely untrue, and he's I don't know what he's speaking out of, but it's definitely not from his mouth and his mind. He is, and I'm sure you guys know exactly what I mean by when I say that, but regardless, he's delusional. He's ridiculous. Like, his takes are delusional at times. And he gets a lot of attention from the media for his delusional takes, because saying that nobody was afraid of LeBron, I know he was afraid of LeBron going up against him, because this is something that you might not remember, but in the series when LeBron was, not necessarily when he was a rookie, but in his first stint on Cleveland, he would go up against the Washington Wizards, and guess who was the star player? Gilbert Arenas. LeBron walked up to Gilbert Arenas at one point, put pressure on him, iced him, saying, "Don't miss these free throws." And guess what he does? He misses those free throws. I don't know what he's talking about, saying that people aren't scared of LeBron when he was the very first person to be scared of LeBron. But I digress. Now, obviously, this podcast with LeBron, he has a lot of things that sort of feel like that he feels like need to be said, and some of it is a little questionable. Like, he said that Drew Holiday got traded for a bag of chips, which is really funny, because it's like he's saying the things that a lot of people outside in the media would say, and he's sort of just projecting it more and giving a lot more people that that is 100% true. He got traded for a bag of chips. But at the same time, that's a little bit disrespectful, because I don't really like saying that players get traded for a bag of chips, unless it's legitimately a bag of chips or a printer like Kyle Korver. But I digress. So, on the podcast, one of the things that caught my attention that he did say was how Allen Iverson and Steph Curry are the most influential players in basketball that he has seen. So, I don't think he was really talking about himself, because obviously, LeBron James is one of the most iconic basketball players and is more iconic than both of them. But I sort of understand, I'm going to pull up the quote exactly. I still sort of understand, exactly what point he's trying to get to. I'm just going to pull it up real quick just to make sure that I got it right. So, they're the two most influential players in the NBA since he's been watching. So, by influential, I think he sort of means people who try to model their game after all of these players. And now, as you can see, going into this era, it's a lot of casual players that just play ball, they focus on their handling and they focus on their three-point shooting, and that is directly a result of Allen Iverson and Steph Curry. We have somebody in the comments, so I'm just going to go ahead and pivot all the way over to that. Curito MVP 11 asks, what should the Warriors do? With 4 question marks. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I think he means I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Do you mean what should they do now, or what should they do going into next season? Because That's two different questions. I mean, what they should do now is try to find a winning formula and like try to find a way to win. That is like the important part, and see if they can try to avoid that play-in scenario, given how a lot of the teams in the West are really close in their records. So they need to go on a big win streak, and the only thing that like really I feel like really needs to be said and like they need to do is so Carrito MVP, he says what should they do going into the next season? Okay, so that's a lot easier to answer. So going into next season, I really feel like they should try to get rid of Klay Thompson. Like, I just don't see him as I don't see him as a valuable player, or as valuable of a player as he was previous years, and I think he's sort of hindering this team with his shooting a lot more than Draymond Green is with his lack of offense. A lot of people, like, they would rather trade Draymond Green, but I just don't think that that's the right move, because like Draymond brings a lot of value to the team and a lot of defense to the team that the team needs going into next season and going like into the season now. And he does a lot of these little things, and not only that, he's also Steph Curry's pick and roll partner. Like, a lot of the times Draymond Green is the one who sets up Steph. But for the next season, they have to take complete advantage of Stephen Curry and Jonathan Kuminga. Those two are the 1 and 2 options, and you have Draymond Green being that facilitator on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to completely revamp the entire lineup going into next season and bring in a lot better role players and a lot more consistent role players. But I really feel like their biggest problem is like just the fact that they can't hit shots when they need to hit shots. I don't know why, but that's sort of the vibe that I get when I watch this team, because like they rely a lot on the 3-point shot. And obviously like that's a very good thing, but it could end up being a really bad thing if Steph Curry's not playing very well. And most of the time, a lot of their losses are sort of like because of Steph Curry not really playing well. Like there will be games where he scores only 6 points. If that was LeBron scoring only 6 points, the media would be on his head. And that's sort of a lot of things that get overlooked because his piss poor shooting, it's definitely not helping the team. More so, Carrito added in the comments, reason why I asked is because where I'm at, they're saying Charlotte Hornets are 95% sure they're getting Stephen Curry after the season. Yeah, I feel like the only reason why they're that sure is because, Del Curry has a history with that team, and he also grew up in Charlotte, and it's like I don't think they're going to get him. I really don't think that they're going to be able to nab Steph Curry. And I think that the big three, all of those guys, they're going to retire as Warriors. Like, I know I said Klay Thompson should probably, you should get rid of Klay Thompson, but I think they're going to bring him back for when he wants to retire. And I don't see Steph Curry going to the Hornets, especially in the position that he's in now. Like, he's not the type of player to be able to carry a team that's sorry. Now, that's just me, though. Like, I mean, whatever moves that Charlotte can make in the offseason to sort of, give Curry that incentive to, come over, maybe that would influence things. Maybe that would influence his opinions. But given Charlotte and their previous history with drafting and, making trades and things of that nature, I really do not think they're going to be enough and they're going to make good enough moves that would convince Steph Curry to go ahead and stay. And with that in mind, it's he's Steph Curry. He's going to be the face of the Warriors, and he's still in his prime. And right now, Charlotte is not in a spot to compete the same way that Golden State is in a spot to compete. I understand that Charlotte is in a much easier conference, so that might also play into him wanting to go there, but I don't see that happening. Now, one more comment for Carrito before I go ahead and talk about LeBron James. Klay Thompson is planning to re-sign for $18 million. I'll go ahead and look into that. I mean, if that is true, then, maybe they'll be a little bit more generous with Klay. But, again, I think they should, if they're not going to get rid of him, they should probably try to cut down a little bit on his minutes and put in other players because as of right now, he was in the starting lineup, then he got demoted down to the bench. He's sort of been playing a lot better on the bench, but again, this is not the same Klay Thompson that I'm used to watching. And if he doesn't, now that he doesn't have his defense, which was sort of like what made him so elite, he has to have the shooting. And he doesn't even have that elite shooting anymore. So it's like you're stuck. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place where it's like loyalty with Klay Thompson and things of that nature. He gave you 4 rings, throw up the 4. But is he really producing as much as when he had the 4 rings? No, he's not really doing that. But that's just my personal opinion on that. And I want to wrap up this segment talking a little bit about LeBron James and his podcast, saying that Steph Curry and Allen Iverson are some of the more influential players going into when he was watching the NBA. Like, we see a lot of these casuals, like, they handle the ball a little bit more. Like, I mean, a lot of things that Iverson did, they were sort of seemed to be carries with the way he would handle it, but now they're not carries, especially when you look at players like Ja Morant, who literally holds the ball like this most of the time when he's dribbling, and that's not getting called for being a carry. And they definitely influence the game in the sense that defense hasn't been, like, wasn't prioritized in their game as much as offense was, given their height and their size. Because Allen Iverson, we all know he's one of the undersized guards standing at around, I believe, 6 feet tall. He might be a little bit shorter than that, but I do know he was one of the smaller guards, and he needed that edge because obviously he didn't really have competent defense, on-ball defense. He was able to get steals, but he didn't have much competent defense because of his height and his size not being able to allow that. So he needed to provide something on the offense, and obviously he's been the pioneer for a lot of crossover moves, and a lot of the things that he does with the basketball are absolutely ridiculous. He inspired Kyrie Irving, and he's inspired so many other point guards that are able to create shots for themselves and thus make it easier for them to create shots for their teammates. Like, before Iverson came in the league, we didn't really see that many guards trying to handle the ball that much in isolation, apart from Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan mostly used the post-up to isolate. Even though he did dribble, he was able to dribble, he mainly used the post-up to run those isolations. Now with Iverson, we've seen him cross Michael Jordan, and it sort of evolved into what the guard position is today, where it's like you sort of have to be able to create that shot yourself. And then going into Steph Curry and how he was able to sort of change the game and influence the game, it's obviously his three-point shooting, because teams have sort of realized, okay, why would I take a mid-range when it's the exact same amount of points as a layup? Why not just take a 3, back up a little bit, and learn how to take the 3? And he's definitely, obviously, like, you can see it now. He's without a doubt changed the game, and I don't see a reason why he definitely, like, wasn't a big pioneer of NBA basketball. And one thing that LeBron does a lot is he sort of, like, he gives credit to a lot of other players before he gives credit to himself. Sometimes, not all the time. There was this one time on a podcast where he was like, when I was able to come back from a 3-1 lead in the finals, that to me right there was made me the best player of all time. That's what he said on an interview at one point. And like, some people would only focus on that and say, oh, he's selfish. But in reality, like, LeBron really gives a lot of credit to a lot of other players in this league and a lot of his former teammates as well. Now, there is another comment, but I'll go ahead and acknowledge that in the third segment, because we are out of time for this second segment. So join me for the third segment as I go ahead and cover all of the NBA games that happened from last night, give a quick recap of the scores and things of that nature. I'll be right back to answer your question, Corrido, after this short break, so stay tuned for that.